In this video, we'll take a look at how you can use Microsoft Visio Professional to make a crow's-foot entity relationship diagram, or ERD. When you open the Visio Professional software, you'll see this screen. Note that the database option is the default selection, so let's click on the Database Model Diagram square to start the ERD building process. This selection opens the grid on which we'll place the ERD. To enlarge the grid, let's click on the Zoom combo box located in the upper right-hand portion of the screen. Let's enlarge the grid by selecting the preferred size. We'll go ahead and choose 100%. Now we can place an entity object on the grid. Select the entity object and drop it anywhere on the grid. When you release the mouse button, the entity object shows its basic framework. Before we'll draw the first crow's foot ERD, we'll have to select the preferred ERD presentation format. So let's select Database, and then we'll pick the options from the menu. This is followed by Document. Note that this selection sequence opens the Database Document Options window. We'll select the General tab. Make sure that the Relational and Physical Names options are selected. Next, select the Relationships tab. Now select the relationships and crow's feet from the show portion of the window. Finally, we'll select Don't Display Name from the Name Display portion of the window. Now let's select the Table tab in the Document Options window and look at the default selections. We'll keep those selections, but you can always go back later to make changes in them. Because we'll accept the default selections, we'll click OK. You're now ready to begin the modeling process. First, drag the next entity object on the left side of your screen and drop it on the grid. Note that you now have two entities on your screen. When an entity object is selected, its properties are shown in the Database Properties window. You can adjust the size of the Database Properties window at the bottom of the screen to see its available options. We'll start by selecting the entity object's definition, so make sure that the definition option in the Categories window is selected. We'll name this first entity Course, so type Course in the physical name slot for the definition selection. The course label is automatically entered in the conceptual name slot. It's best to keep this format to ensure that the conceptual and physical names always match. Note that the entity name also shows up in the entity's top margin. Next, let's define a few attributes for the course entity. Therefore, select Columns from the Categories portion of the window by clicking on the Columns option. We'll name the first course attribute Course Code, CRS_code, so type that label in the Physical Name option. Select the data type for the Course Code attribute. We'll select Character as the data type. Incidentally, note that you have many data type options available. You should know what the appropriate data type is anyway. After all, you must be familiar with the data environment before you even begin to think about database design. Because the course code will be the course entity's primary key, click on the PK option. Note that this selection automatically makes the attribute values required also. Type the course credits attribute name next. Note that the course credits attribute is an integer value, so select it. Make sure that this attribute is a required entry, but note that it is not a PK component. Type the course title and select its data type. Varchar will do nicely. Finally, select course description and once again select Varchar. Note, by the way, that both are required. You can now move the attributes within the entity attribute space. Just click on the margin to select the entire row and then drag the attribute name up or down. Actually, you should know that the attribute order doesn't matter, but we often arrange the attributes for display purposes. Since we've done quite a bit of work, let's save the design. We'll assume that the course entity is part of the Tiny College database design, so you can select the Save As option to place the course entity in an appropriate folder. For example, we can use one named Tiny College. Within this folder, let's type the file name. In this case, we've selected ERD. You can click on Save and then you can click on OK. Now let's create the next entity. Click on the Table to Entity object that's already on the grid. We'll name this entity Class. Next, let's add some class entity attributes. In this example, we'll assume that the class entity's primary key is a single attribute class code. We'll select character as the data type. Now click on the PK checkbox. Next, we'll create the second attribute. We'll create that attribute as class day. We'll declare its data type to be character and we'll make it required. Now we'll create the third attribute. We'll name it class time. Let's declare its data type to be character and we'll make it required also. Now that we have created two entities, let's establish a relationship between them to reflect these business rules. First, each course may generate one or more classes. And second, each class has been generated by one and only one course. To establish this relationship, first select the relationship object and drag it to the grid and drop it. Note that the implied default cardinalities are 1, 1 and 0, n. Because the relationship between course and class is one-to-many, place the one side of the relationship on the course side. You do that by dragging it all the way inside the course entity box. Drop it when the course entity is outlined in red if you want to attach the relationship line to the course. The relationship line is not attached unless the red squares appear. Repeat the previous process to attach the many side of the relationship line. Note that the relationship line is dashed, indicating a weak or non-identifying relationship between course and class. You learn to classify relationship in Chapter 4. Incidentally, note that in this example, the default selections show optional relationships on both sides. But because course must exist before each class is created, course is mandatory to class. To show that course is mandatory to class, select the class entity, select the course code foreign key, and click on the foreign key's required checkbox to place a checkmark in it. Note the effect on the relationship line. You now have declared that course is mandatory to class. A course, of course, does not necessarily generate a class each period, so class is optional to course. Note that the default selection already shows an optionality, so no additional changes are necessary. We have just completed a small ERD segment of the Tiny College database design. You will learn how to edit relationships in the second video of the Learning to Use Visio series.